What are some of the impacts that this space has had on people who visit it?
Oh no, you have to ask them. What's the impact it's had on you? Like you visited?
Okay, fine, Alice.
Like I don't know. I don't know. I think people are happy about it. I've seen like it's made people excited. Like I find that people when they visit, they're like, for the most part, like really excited about the fact that this even exists. Like it makes them really like the black people that visit are like, wow, like this is nice. Like it seems very affective. I love that word affective. But if it seems very affective, like it seems like it really like makes them feel seen or feel like they don't have to perform as much in this space or excited about what they can do in this space or what is being done in this space is like I think that's how it affects. I think it makes people like feel like dreaming is worth it. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, I can dream and there's like places where my dreams can go, which I think is really important. I think is a privilege that a lot of people don't have. It's like everyone's like, yo, dream, just dream. But it's like, where are my dreams going to go if I don't see anything? There's no space for it if I don't see anywhere that my dreams can go.
Um, all right, so let's start with background. Tell me about yourself and about this space as well, the Black Arts Centre.
It's weird. I think I never thought of myself doing this type of work. Like, I went to school for economics, and like, my sense of the world was always, I think, I don't know how to describe it, but I grew up in Nigeria, so the way I look at the world or looked at the world was really informed by that. And Nigeria is like, and Lagos is a very like multicultural, but in a very black way. Like basically everyone is black there, and there's a lot of elitism, like classism, and so like we don't have racism as much. So like my understanding of the world was very, I would say, limited but wide. So because I didn't have certain things, I was experiencing other things. I don't know how to describe it. And then when I lived here, it was a bit of a culture shock, a kind of culture shock that I didn't sit with for a really long time. And then when I began to sit with it, I just like really, I think went through a lot of different emotions, like ranging from like anger to like despair and like hope. And I just felt like a lot of spaces were they were just not inclusive of the range of identities that I've like come to know within myself and just like the people around me. And I think being a guy, like being a black guy, there was like a type of fetishization that I experienced here, that when I talked to like my friends that were black women, it was kind of the opposite experience. And I just like learned a lot from them. And that coupled with I think a lot of the world's like continuing like fall, like I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, just the way the world was working or like the world works is really unsustainable. Like, and I think I feel like what hurling towards not the end of the world, but like yeah, things are just going to keep getting worse. I'm like, I would rather spend my time here trying to make things better for the community that is like I am a part of. And I think I'd kind of experienced certain things like working in tech and like seeing other sides of the world. I was like, this is not actually like I kind of got to some degree the like idealized like idea of like what I should be doing, which is like having this specific type of job and making this type of money or whatever. But I was really unhappy and I really hated my life, and I worked at, and then solid state was a huge factor in that. And like just like seeing how that community was run or that organization is being run kind of made me feel like things were possible. You know, they say that you have to dream. Like dreaming is, I think, a core part of all of this. But being able to see dreams come to fruition really helped me divest from certain things. And then, yeah, like with like coming into the Black Art Center, like I guess I came in like maybe 3 months after the idea was like first formed. So I was part of the founding team of co-directors, and it just came from a lack of space, a lack of spaces to build community, specifically for Black people in this city, because I feel like something that will always happen would be like I'll meet people and I'm like, oh wow, how long have you lived here? And they're like, oh, I've been here for 5 years. And I'm like, how have we never met? You know, and those spaces just didn't exist. So
I just want to say I think it's beautiful as well to feel how different people get onto the path of creating something. Because the starting point and the end point can be really interesting in that sense as well. And you mentioned like difference and unsustainability. What were you seeing within that within this space it could have been the answer?
I think this idea of just endless work, like without intention, something that Vanessa always says, like doing things with intention, and how intention requires time. It requires you to slow down. And I think like I was in a space, and I think a lot of the world that we live in, there's very few spaces that allow us to actually slow down and think with intention. So in as much as we're kind of in this post, quote unquote, post BLM era where like everyone is like, organizations like, oh, decolonize now and all of these things, we're unable to do that without fundamentally changing the way we work and the way we interact with the world around us. And we're not doing that. And that requires us to slow down. And if you don't slow down, you can't, like, sustainability requires slowing down. It requires us to like stop and think. And there's very little time to do that in capitalism. It's like production. It's about doing more. It's about continuously making. And I think with this space, I was really interested in the idea of being able to slow down and build with intention, and like have the space to like, and what that allows is like a space to fail, a space to learn, a space to experiment. And I think that was kind of part of what drew me to this work, is like, okay, like with what we're building here, because this doesn't exist and has never existed in this built environment, it puts a lot of pressure on like what it could be, but then it also allows us to work without the like pressure of the past, like of like, oh yeah, we used to do this and now we're doing this. Like there is no used to, like all we're doing is what we're doing now. So I think that really drew me in. And I think I've always worked, as I think about it, I've always worked like in like creative industries, but just always on the side. Like I've been doing Made by We since 2016. Like I wanted to make clothes, I wanted to do those things, and I think I just never saw working in community or like creatively as like something that was feasible, possible, or real, because I didn't grow up in a space where that was really real. Like, you know, it was, yeah, like I grew up in a very different environment where for you to even work in community or have the impact in community requires access to certain like resources that you only get if you have done other things first. So yeah, I think that difference, I think ties, like if I think of the root of it, is really capitalism. Like, and obviously the Black Art Center exists in like a system that is like, we operate under capitalism, there's no escape in that, but just being able to build a space that allows for respite, like that you can rest from that, or like the expectation is not to produce more, it's to, I think, engage more, like have more impact or like build community, which I think is like a bit less the metrics are not as quantifiable. You can't quantify the impact of someone seeing the show, the impact of like coming to a workshop and making a friend, you know, of building relationships. But I think those are the things that are most important. But yeah, that was the difference, is that ability to actually focusing on intention. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. I can go two ways here. I'm going to start with this one. You mentioned intentionality quite a few times. So I'm wondering what your intentions were collectively, like, one for this space, and also for how people interact with this space.
Yeah. Like for me personally, my intention with this space is to give, in a very general sense, give Black people a space to be able to dream about new things. So we are in Surrey, we are in Metro Vancouver. Most Black people that live in Metro Vancouver live here. Most people of color that live in Metro Vancouver live here. But we're the only artist-run center in the city of Surrey. And if you contrast that like with like Vancouver has artist-run centers everywhere. Like I can name 15. And I think when I think about that, I think about how the lack thereof of spaces to experience art and culture impacts in very real ways the ability to dream about a future that goes beyond what is expected of you. So if you're an artist, you're in high school, if this space exists, you can come and see a show with artists who look like you, who are emerging, and it can kind of give you the validation that you need to like, okay, yeah, like I actually want to go to art school, I want to like pursue this full time, or I want to like look more into this. There are names that you can call on, there are people that you can see doing this, which goes beyond representation, but like actually being able to interact with the people, being able to like, oh yeah, this is Delali's work, this is Dion's work, let me look into who these people are. I think my intention is for people, like young people, to be able to like create new realities through this, or like have this as a foundation that gives them the ability to then form other things outside of this that might relate to themselves, might relate to their own communities, might relate to their own like politics about the world around them. And then I want to also be able to like put on work and like have people who don't have like any artistic interest, like you don't have any interest in being an artist, but we all enjoy looking at beautiful things, we all enjoy looking at art, to be able to like feel comfortable coming into the space, regardless of like your race, your gender, like anything. Like you can come into the space and feel like, oh yeah, like this is comfortable, like I can look at the art, I can experience it, I can ask questions, which is like an experience that is very different from a lot of galleries. Like it's really about accessibility, and like when I think about who a gallery is for, it's like it should be for the people, like it should be for the working class people. At the end of the day, this is funded by, most galleries are funded by grants. So why am I feeling like the work that is being shown in these spaces or the programming doesn't relate to majority of the people in the environment? And then when I think of how I want people to interact with the space, I don't know, like I think there's a lot of, I want people to interact with the space however they feel comfortable. Like I think comfort is like my number one thing. I want people to feel comfortable enough to come into the space and like relax here and ask questions and give opinions and give feedback. I really want people to use the space to connect with each other and think of this. Obviously, there's going to be very many different iterations of what the space looks like, but I think of it as kind of a type of third space. You don't have to pay to come in here. We're open from 12 to 6. You can come in here and spend the whole 6 hours here. Like there's no expectation for you to leave or to get anything or to give anything to the space. So I want people to be able to utilize this as a space to gather, as a place to meet, as a place to connect with other people and connect with themselves as well. Like it's a lot of different things, and I'm trying not to I think with curating the show, like I've learned a lot about flexibility and like letting go of certain expectations. I want people to interact with the space as the space allows them to, and like it's something that is like we're learning as we're doing, or I'm learning, or I'm figuring out as we do more programming and do things here.
And another thing you spoke about before was feasibility, that you didn't think like going into this kind of space was feasible until you did it.
Yeah.
So what have you learned?
Honestly, it sounds a bit corny, but I really think anything is possible. Like honestly, doing this work, working with Solid State, like working with the people that I have worked with, the people that I've become friends with, I really feel like anything is possible. It just requires a lot of work and dedication and time and commitment and networks, because this space would not exist without the network of people who have been working in various industries trying to like make a space like this possible in their lifetime. There are people that have been doing, like working in the arts, working in community, working in, like cultural workers who have been doing this for like 10, 15 years. And this might not have been, it might not have been like, oh, I'm going into this so that we can create a space like this, but the legacy of that work is what allowed something like this to be possible. Like being able to interact with those people and like ask for help and have those people support us in so many different ways is how this has become possible. So I've learned a lot about, I think, asking for help. Like it's really difficult sometimes for me to like just like, hey, like I need help with this, but I think there's a lot you learn from about like letting go of control when you ask for help and like knowing your own limitations. Like I can't do everything. The team can't do everything, but we can ask for help, and to not undervalue yourself. Like I think there's certain projects that we've done that because we have people who have been doing like working in the arts for a while, they were able to like, we asked, oh yeah, how much should we charge this organization for us to like curate this thing for them? And the number we hear from kind of our like mentors or like older friends goes way beyond what we were probably going to say. And then we say the number and it's like, yeah, like that's fine. And I think just that was a big learning point too. Like it's like something that I've told other people that I've worked with is like, if you don't know what to price something you're offering, like a service, or like how much to ask for, whatever the number is, especially if you're Black, especially if you're a person of color, especially if you are a woman, whatever number you think of, add at least 50% to that. Like literally, like, because you're likely undervaluing what this is worth. And then also learning that we don't have to say yes to everything. I think something that when we're doing this, like because it felt so lofty and so impossible, we're saying yes to a lot of things, and almost I think now we're at a place, or we've always been at a place where we can say no to things and like really think about like what is the value add here for what our mandate is. Like, are we just being used? Is this actually building a relationship, or is this just like a project that this organization wants to use to fill a quota? Because now, for a lot of grants, you kind of have to have the work that you're doing impact like people of color. And a lot of like the legacy organizations in Metro Vancouver don't have Black people, don't have indigenous people, don't have people of color. So it's like they have to now reach out to all of us now and say, okay, yeah, we can say no, actually this doesn't make sense for us. So those are some of the learnings.
Nice. So imagine that there's another group that is similar to you, comes from like an economics background, and they're like, there isn't a space in our community, but we want to make something, but it's not feasible.
Yeah.
What were some of the steps that you took from, this is something that isn't an idea, to this now exists?
I think I would start with the why. Like, why, two whys, like, why is this important to have? I think that was kind of the guiding light for this space and what allowed us to make this real. Why is this necessary? Why here? Why now? And then once you understand that why, then asking why is this not feasible? Like, what part of this idea of feasibility is based in like a reality of what is actually possible or an idea of what I think is possible? And then once you're able to separate those two things, then it makes it easier to kind of know what to, I don't say attack, but like what to go after. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, this might not be feasible because there's literally no land, like, like around, like, so we can't do that. So maybe we have to pivot. But I would say also, once you have that why, then looking in your community or the communities that are around you, or the people that have done, look to people who have been doing this work before. Like, you're not, the coconut didn't just fall out of the sky. Like, was something about coconut tree. Like, you're attached to a tree. Like, your idea is not actually that new. Like, there's, like there's probably people who are already working on this or have worked on something similar that you can go to and be like, hey, this is what we're trying to do, and they can probably give you some advice or some support. I'll say, honestly, for us, the most important thing was like having support systems and having people who, like, allies who care about this as much or even more than you, people that will be able to sit in meetings with, where they have the legitimacy that you might not have, and be able to command authority with potential partners and things like that, which we've been really lucky to have. Like, honestly, it's been, yeah, we've gotten like really good advice, really good support systems, all of those things. So I would say that's where to look, and like looking within yourselves, like your community people, like people around you and people that have been doing the work before you. And then and listening, like it's really a lot of listening, like being able to like know when to listen to, I'll say, the elders, and when to be like, nah, like I get what you're saying, but like we want to do it this way. So it's a huge practice in listening and like letting go of like what you think you want or what you think you need. Yeah.
How did this, as a group, even before the space, but as a group, how did it start? How did you guys connect? How did you start going? Yeah. And also, you mentioned Solid State a little bit as well. Like, who is Solid State and what was that as well?
Yeah, true. Like, it probably sounds like this like ominous entity that's just like behind us. Like I'll start with like, I guess, describing Solid State, because that's like the catalyst for this. So Solid State Community Industries is a co-op developer based in Surrey, and it's made up of maybe 20-ish co-ops now, and they basically work with migrant populations to build co-ops that are revenue generating and like supports the needs of the people in the community. So like they have co-ops range, they have TCC, which is a cleaning co-op, they have us, they have Ethos Lab, they have Salam Central, Let Her Talk, a bunch of different co-ops that do various things. And if you're not familiar with what the co-op is, basically like how I think of co-ops is thinking of an organization, like, because there's four, like, I guess we are non-profit, but there's like for-profit, quote unquote, co-ops. So basically thinking about building businesses or building organizations with equity at the center of it. Like, instead of equity being something that you tag on at the end of the organization, equity is at the center. And putting people before profits. It's like, oh, the organization has to like work, but what is profit anyways? Like, if you really think about the idea of like profit, it has to do with extraction of labor. It's like, if there's profit, someone's labor got extracted to make this profit. So Solid State is really focused on like spreading the idea of like cooperative values, which is like really rooted in equity, really rooted in like equitable decision making. So like everyone has a say, everyone has a vote. Like it's not dependent on who you are or like how much money you put into something. It's like I'm here, you're here, so we both deserve to have a say. And so Solid State at that point in time in 2020 had been working with a lot of racialized youth in Surrey, and something that's a core principle of Solid State is Surrey centrism. So like centering Surrey in the conversation because it's always Vancouver. So my understanding of what happened was, I think, I don't say in the wake of like what happened in 2020, but what has been happening for decades, as every Black person knows. I think there were just conversations about like, okay, what is needed now? Like, what does not exist in this area, like in this community that is needed? And people were always talking about space. Like, we need space to organize, we need space to meet, we need space to create, we need space to nurture talent. So I think the idea developed at Solid State, and the original team was, I think, Becky and and someone else, and then it was kind of like, okay, we need to build this team, so we need people that have different skills. And because I like had a relationship with Solid State at the time, and like I was in school for economics, I have like a business background. It was like, okay, we need someone who has this like business background to be able to relate to like kind of first of all do like some of the administrative work, but also help with like raising money and also talking to the corporate people that we have to talk to make this possible. So they reached out to me and were like, oh, like, will I be interested in this? And they also needed someone that was like, has a business background, but isn't like a business bro in the in like the classic sense. So they reached out to me and I was like, yeah, like I'm really down to do this. And that was the beginning of 2021. So it was like me, Moroti, Becky, Arshi, and I think all of us had, none of us knew, like we didn't know each other. I think Becky and Moroti knew each other, but I didn't know Becky or Moroti. But me and Moroti had been in a class together, funny enough. But yeah, then we met then and kind of talked about like, okay, we come from like, I think like diverse groups of like thinking of Blackness. Oh my God. Yeah. And so it was like, okay, let's come together and talk about what this would actually look like or could actually look like. And we didn't have the space until last year. So a lot of the work we were doing was really outside of our space. We did a lot of collaborations with the Surrey Art Gallery, with Polygon, with Push, with all of these different organizations, partially because we didn't have a space, but also because they were like keen on working with us and like cared about what we wanted to do. And so that was how the team came together. And then Vanessa joined about, I think, maybe a year after we started. And like Vanessa had been a co-director at Solid State, so she was always involved in the project informally. And then we were able to, like, Solid State was able to kind of get the developer here to give us a reduced rate on rent, and then like we had to do all of these renovations, which would have cost a lot of money, but we got a lot of in-kind support from the developers in the area because of that network. And I think also timing was a big part of it. Like I think because of we're able to kind of capitalize on the like the white guilt of it all, like, oh my God, like Black people exist now. Like, like everyone's like, wow, we care about Black people. Like, they need stuff. So I think that definitely helped. It's unfortunate that, yeah, like what the events that led to this feeling important enough for people to like put their resources towards it. But I think the timing was a big part of it. Like, honestly, if the pandemic never happened, probably this would not exist. Like, because the powers that be or the people that control stuff could have just been like, yeah, this is not that important, it's not that necessary. So that was kind of how we came together and we were kind of talking a lot about like, okay, what do we want the space to be? And we did a lot of just like team, like vision planning meetings and stuff. And it's funny that a lot of the ideas that we had then, like the space has kind of changed a lot since then. Just, yeah, like expectation versus reality, and like kind of figuring out like, okay, what works? Like, what do people need? And I think I like to, like funny, I like to plan things, look at last minute, but I like to plan and I have expectations. And something that a lot of our ad board had been telling us is like, you can't compare yourself to any other organization that exists here because this does not exist yet. Like, this is a new organization. So we have to just wait until we're open and really use the like this year and the year before to really like figure out what we want this organization to be and like how flexible we want to be, what do we want to use the space for, who do we want to allow use the space, those kind of things. So that was really helpful. So it was like that team got formed, and we got our ad board, which is just like made up of some really dope, just like arts and cultural people who have been working in Metro Vancouver for decades. And so we're able to like just reach out to them and hey, like we need help with this. Like, what do you think? Getting that advice has been really pivotal to, or like really necessary for our organization survival. Yeah, that's how we came together.
You just mentioned dreams and reality.
Yeah.
And the ideas that you had in the start, maybe not coming to fruition, maybe going in a different direction.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
It feels real. I think something that's funny asking this because I'm reading this book, plug right now, My Friend, There Is No Friend. My Friend, There Is No Friend. It was written by Matt Hearn and Joel. I hope I'm not fucking up his name. And yeah, it's about friendship, and it's honestly a really good book. Like I'm so, wow, it's such a good book. But they were interviewing this guy and they were talking about kind of thinking beyond the now and like this idea of dreaming. Like, and what I'm saying is taking it out of context, but this is how I'm answering your question. So he was talking about how basically like when we think of a future, a new future that has not existed before, it starts with a dream. And the thing that we have to be able to understand, or like what is actually really helpful in making the futures that we want, is not to make that dream a reality, which when you're in that kind of process, that's what the American dream looks like. It's like you're kind of chasing this dream. It's almost like you're chasing a dragon, because the dragon will never be real. The dream does not include any of the restrictions that reality does include. So it's like, I don't want to make this dream a reality. What I actually want to do is use this dream as like a push-up point for building my reality. And that's kind of how I feel. It's like, oh yeah, like a dream, like my it's a dream, like, you know, it's like fantastical. Like it does not include any of the nuances of even human interaction. So when I think of like the dream versus the reality of what the space is, I feel like it is real and I'm happy. Like I'm happy. I think even when I think of this year versus last year, where we are as an organization is very different. And I'm happy about that. And it makes me feel like excited about the future, because I feel like, okay, yeah, like this is really cool, that this is real in this way, like it is real in this way. And it's not even like those dreams didn't manifest, it's just the way other things have taken precedence over certain dreams, or like, you know, you have certain dreams without having the experience of life or the world that would change what that dream is. Yeah. And like just knowing, yeah, like I don't feel like, I feel great. Like I it's weird. Like I don't know if that's weird, but like I feel settled. I feel happy. I feel like some of those dreams were not for right now. Yeah.
So in this context, what does growth mean to you?
Like where we are at right now, growth is about revenue, flexibility, stability, and systems. Like having certain systems in place that allow the organization or like the space to like be running smoothly is growth, because that's kind of where we are at now. It's like, okay, we have the space, things are working, now we have to like ensure that the systems that all of this work through are actually systems. So that's what growth looks like for me. It's just having certain things in place. Like it's really hard for me to like remove myself from like growth being this like idea of like increasing in size, because that's just how the world I live in like sees it. But it's about impact. It's about like, okay, we're growing if more people that we want to touch are being touched. Sounds weird. More people that we want to experience the space, or experience the space in a more like life affirming way. That's how I'll put it.
How have you grown?
Wow. Yeah, look, you didn't expect this interview to like make you really reflect this way. I think I've grown a lot. Like I think I've grown a lot. I think I have learned a lot about my own limitations, but also learned a lot about my own abilities. There are things that I don't want to say I didn't think I could do, but I didn't even think think I could think about doing. I'm doing now, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I think I've learned about what's really important to me. I've learned what it means to be at service to people, like, and how energizing that can be, but also how draining and like tiring that can be in a very different way. I've learned to slow down a bit, just a bit. I've learned to rely on people more and to like trust that other people know what they're doing, and I don't have to do everything, and I don't have to like think about everything all the time. I've also learned like really, I think I've learned that everything takes time. That anything is possible, but everything takes time. Like it's all just constant practice. Like this space is a constant practice in something. Like, and then you just like wake up one day and you're like, oh wow, like this thing that I wanted to do 2 years ago, I'm doing it right now, and I'm doing it well. But I didn't even like stop to appreciate that or like take note of that. So I'll say those are the things I've learned. I've just learned like the importance of community. Like it's really, really important. Like, and that like, you know, change begins, like it's weird, like, you know, change actually begins with yourself. Like, you know, you can't change the world or like change your environment if you don't change your own relationship to the world, relationship to your environment, and then like in some ways your relationship to yourself.
How have you dealt with failure or the idea of failure? And how have you progressed?
Honestly, I've never failed. So I'm joking. No. Honestly, I think before, failure used to get me really down, and it was really hard to move forward from failure. But I think recently I've honestly had a couple failures in my life that have allowed me to grow. And I think I try to see failure as like an opportunity for like getting a better understanding of yourself. Because I think like, you know, when you win or like when you succeed, like it's nice, and obviously I love succeeding, but there's a kind of introspection that like failure kind of gives you the space to move into that I have learned to embrace. And like just knowing that like it doesn't really matter in the long scheme, like in the scheme of things, like, you know, like as long as I did my best, or like I tried, and I'm able to kind of understand why the failure occurred, it's easy for me to move past it. Not easy because I then beat myself up and I'm like, oh, I should have done this differently or done that differently. But once I understand like why something happened or like why I failed, I'm able to, or I try to like process it and then move past it in a way that is, I won't say productive, but like healthy or helpful. Yeah, like I try to just sit with it and know that it doesn't end. It's not the end of the world. Like, you know, in the moment, it really sucks to fail, especially if it's public failure. But there's something that Naya used to say, or like Naya said, there's like public failure is a part of growth or a part of life. It's like everyone fails. Like it's just part of existence. If you're not failing, you're not trying. You know, yeah. Obviously hard, but I just try not to fail. Like I try to just accept it. And like I have a good community of people. Or actually, yeah, I think I have a good support system that allows me to, that helps me process the failure, or like helps me get out of my head when I fail. Yeah, that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I feel like when you're creating something new and you don't know what you're doing, because a lot of the time there's like, it's very likely maybe everybody has this failure, right? And when you're talking about that difference between dream and reality, there's like a failure between that, but you're like, oh, I need to pivot.
Yeah, pushback from the city and like fake interest from like, not the city like this city, but yeah, the city and like the people that live in the city. It's a bit slower pace than like other parts of like other major cities, and I think that kind of affect like being able to put something like this together. I also think funding is a big one. Like it can be really difficult to get funding. Like I think for us we're in a very unique scenario, but I think for a lot of other organizations it's like even us it's hard to get funding. Like, and like these things cost money. It costs money to pay people for their labor. Like no one should be doing this work for free. Like no one has even the time to do this work for free. Like we're not, I think we're in a stage of capitalism that like does not even allow us to like take advantage of like volunteers the way that you used to like 10 years ago, because now everyone is working all the time. Like people have such little free time, and this type of work is so labor intensive and requires so much work, like being in the space, like not actually being in the space and doing all the back end work. I think it requires a lot of funding, and that can be hard to come by, especially because of how the granting systems work, that you have to have existed for a certain amount of time before you're eligible for grants, but then that excludes the people that actually need the grants, because legacy institutions are not the ones that are filled with like racialized and marginalized people, but the granting bodies require you to have existed for like 2 years before you can apply for their grant. And it's like, why is that? Why do I need to have existed for 2 years? Are you trying to tell me that like, oh, I need to have like grinded for 2 years before it's worth it? Especially now when we understand that like before people were not getting the grants, like racialized people were not getting the grants whether or not they existed for 2 years. And now there's a lot of new organizations that need this type of, they need funding in their first year, because that funding is what allows them grow to a place where they can even exist for 2 years. So I'll say it is hard, but I think most things are hard. I think there are things that make it easier, but yeah, it's hard. I don't think I look at it as hard, because I think for me, my alternative was working in tech, and like that was a different kind of hard, where this I actually feel like what I am doing is of value. Like I feel happy to work, which I think is a privilege that not a lot of people have.
Do you think that Metro Vancouver is a hard place to create this type of space?
Definitely. I think for many reasons. I think it's hard because of what brings people to Metro Vancouver and like the class dynamics here, wealth disparity, like anti-blackness, racism, all those many different things, and how hard it can be to explain to people why this is important, or like know whether or not people actually believe in the importance of this. I think in other cities where like they're a bit less liberal than this, I think people who don't care about something like this just wouldn't care, and like they wouldn't show up or they wouldn't feign interest. But I feel like here, like people might feign interest. People might feel like, oh, like I have to act like this is important because I don't want people to think that I don't care, which I think can make it harder to like actually move things forward, because you can have people give commitments that they're not willing to actually fulfill, or they have no interest in actually making happen. But at the same time, because it is a liberal city, like I feel like it might be easier to access certain resources for something specifically like this than in somewhere like Toronto, where there's a lot of Black people in Toronto. Like the Nia Center exists there. Okay, so obviously they already needed something. They need something like this everywhere. But yeah, I think it's hard. Like I think there's a systematic issue that goes beyond like race or class and has to do with just the infrastructure of Metro Vancouver and how expensive it is and how it is made not for, I think, like the people in mind. Like it's really like made with the intention of like producing profits and not having people disrupt the quote unquote peace in people's neighborhoods. So I think that makes it difficult for something like this to exist in other parts of Metro Vancouver or in Metro Vancouver, because I just think there's a lot of...
How have you navigated that?
Navigated what exactly?
Some of the trickiness within Vancouver. Please.
As an organization or person?
As an organization.
I think I've said this a lot, but I think it's like moving with intention and being able to balance things and like having like a diverse enough team that like you know that there's going to be conflict on your team, which I think is really important. Like it's important to have a team that I know that I might want to do things that Vanessa Moroti might be opposed to. That is important to have, because then it allows us to kind of maintain a balance in like what we actually do, what activities we do. I think being able to rely on the work of like people that have done this before, like being just able to ask people like, hey, like what do you think? Like you've done this for the past 7 years, what do you think we should do? And like taking that advice into consideration and leaning on other people, other organizations, but also being very selfish with what we give away to people that aren't in our community. Being very aware of like what is for us and what is for other people. And that has helped. And yeah, sometimes you have to like dance with the colloquial devil. Like, you have to sometimes we work with, not that we work with people that we hate, but like, it's about balance. Like I think for this type of space to exist, you have to strike the balance. And honestly, we've actually been really good at it. But being able to compromise on certain things, like, okay, this is what I want. I can't get exactly this, but I'll get something else. And the solid state of it all, like being attached to like a community of organizations that also have like equity at their center, means that we have access to organizations and funders who care about this type of work. Which also, there's still work that goes into, okay, now I know the funder exists, but like having to reach out and like build that relationship is another step. But that really helps us like navigate a lot of things. And I think the space that we take up in Metro Vancouver is a very unique one. And there aren't that many organizations like us. And I think that also has been really helpful in navigating like those hardships. I'm persistent. Being persistent as hell. Like just keep asking, keep doing the thing. Ask for feedback. If you don't get the grant, like, yo, why didn't we get the grant? Ask for funding from people. Like, I think there's something I really learned from Matt, which is just like, yeah, like, just ask directly. Like, sometimes you just have to, like, face-to-face ask the person, and, like, that being flustered can work to your advantage.
Nice. Well, looking back in creating BLAC, if you're going to do it again, what would you change? What would you keep?
Maybe I'll slow down a bit more. I think even though we're walking a bit slow, I think we're like kind of fell for like victim to this like idea of like having this thing ready quickly because like so many people care about this. Well, I've slowed down more. Like it's like, where are we rushing to? Like time is not. It's not like if we had opened the space 3 months or 6 months later than we did, in the grand scheme of things, it would have like made that much of a difference. I think maybe I've devoted more time to this earlier on, if I knew that it was actually possible. I think I'll keep most things. Like I think everything that we've gone through as an organization has been a huge learning. Because if I say like what would I not have, my awareness of not having that is part of me saying I wouldn't have that. So if I said that and we're doing it again, it's kind of sorry. Oh my God, I feel like that sounded so. But yeah, like it's like, yeah, if I don't keep this, then obviously I don't know what it feels like to not have this. So I'll probably have kept it in the first place. But I would also have like maybe like someone dedicated to like our emails because we sometimes like can be bad at like replying emails. But yeah, and like just more awareness of like how much work this is. I think I didn't know just like, well, this is a lot of work. Like it's a lot of work. And it sometimes feels different because it's like, oh, this is work I like, but it's still work. Like I'm still doing a lot of work. So just being more aware of like how much time that would require and like what that process would look like, and maybe like taking that slowness to like set up systems earlier on so that we're not at a point where we're like really open to the public and people are coming in and excited to see the show, and we still have like certain things on the back end to work on, which will always happen. But yeah.
Okay, another question. It's like a wider question.
Yeah.
Is there something that we as facilitators of spaces should be paying attention to in terms of how we relate to people? What should that be?
I think accessibility is like something I think about, thinking about just how the different ways that people interact or like communicate or are comfortable communicating and the levels that they are at with that, and how that's not a reflection on our ability to facilitate, but just like some people don't like to talk and that should be okay. And being able to like make accommodations for people's needs more intentionally. And then I would also say like being aware of like how, like at least for me, like how like my anxieties or like my own nervousness might project onto like the other people in the room. Like I might be projecting something and like I'm like, oh my God, people are, but it's like it's not happening how I'm thinking it's happening in my head. And I think also being just like more honest with like people, like when we're facilitating, I think every time I've ever admitted to the audience or like the people that I'm with that, oh my God, I'm really nervous or like stressed out about something or about this, it's really like almost acted as an icebreaker because a lot of them also feel the same way. And it's like, okay, yeah, like I just said it, I just put words to the thing that most people are feeling. And then something else that someone put in my mind, which I've been thinking about a lot more, is thinking of like decolonization in an experiential way. So like how we set up rooms, where we put food, like how we like set up the relationship between the people that came to see the thing and the people that are running the thing. Like what kind of steps can we take to like, when we think of decolonization, like actually decolonize like our ways of being, like that will change the experience for people. Like for instance, like having the chair set up in a different way, having the food being like, cause it's like the food is at the back, and someone was talking to me about this, and she was like, oh, like if we think about it, the food, a lot of the time, food is what brings people together. So why are we putting the food away from everyone? We're putting it in a place that does not actually foster communication, but if we put it more centrally, like it actually forces people to like interact a lot more. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I don't know if that will work for every scenario, but it's something to think about. And it had me thinking about just like, okay, what beyond the idea of like a land acknowledgement or like reading or things like that, like what kind of actions can we take that like helps us embody decolonial practices that like actually like we're actually critically thinking of like facilitation beyond, and I don't say beyond the colonial, but like beyond the colonial, like okay, like why is it this way? Why are the seats this way? What would it change? Like what, like experimenting more, I think is like a way to think about this. Like yeah, like if I'm getting to facilitate, I'm a facilitator, this is not the only time I'm doing this. So like why don't I just try putting the chairs in a like circular like order instead of them being straight? Like what would that do to the relationship people have with each other in the space? And then it might be the worst facilitation ever, or it might be like, oh wow, this actually works a lot better, and now you've learned something that you can take into the future. Either way, it's a learning experience. So I think that's why those are the things that I would say.
That's good. It's such an interesting point of like how people experience spaces, and for me that kind of brought the question of like, do you feel welcome? Am I welcome as soon as I step into this?
Yeah, that's really true. That's really, really true. Huh. Yeah, I think that's actually that's actually the most important thing. Yeah, like do you feel welcome in the space? I think it's felt like